If you have ever watched an elderly person stand in front of a door for several seconds, trying to grip the round knob with hands that no longer close completely, twisting their wrist back and forth while their groceries dangle from their other arm, you have already seen the second-order effect of this video. Now, picture the same person at a door in Berlin or Amsterdam. They walk up, they press the lever down with the side of their hand, their elbow, or even the handle of their grocery bag. The door opens. The whole interaction takes less than a second. There is no grip, no twist, no problem. Same person, same task. Two completely different experiences with the most basic piece of hardware in any building. The round doorknob in America, the lever handle across most of Europe. Two different solutions to opening a door, and a gap between them that has quietly affected millions of older adults, people with arthritis, people with hand injuries, parents holding babies, and anyone whose hands happen to be full at the exact moment they reach for a door. If you live in the United States, you have probably never thought about this. The round door knob is so embedded in American homes that most Americans have never used anything else inside a house. If you have traveled to Europe, you may have noticed the lever handles and felt them work and quietly thought, "That is easier," before forgetting about it the moment you got home. Here is what should bother you for the next 10 minutes. The lever handle is dramatically better at the actual job of opening a door than the round knob. This is not opinion. It is measurable. Lever handles require about 50% less force to operate. They can be opened with a closed fist, an elbow, a forearm, or even a hip nudge when both hands are full. They are mandatory in commercial American buildings under the Americans with Disabilities Act, precisely because the round knob fails accessibility requirements. And yet the round knob remains the default in nearly every American home built today, while Europe quietly switched decades ago. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why the lever did not cross from commercial American buildings into residential American homes, and why one Canadian city actually banned round door knobs in new construction in 2014, and what happened next. Stay with me, because the third reason involves a single legal fact about American homes that meant the better design never had any pressure to spread. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Here is the punchline up front. American homes still use round knobs not because Americans prefer them or because they are objectively better. They use them because of three things that stack together over 100 years. 1878 invention that gave America its own doorknob industry before lever handles were widely available. An ADA accessibility law that quietly required lever handles in commercial buildings but specifically exempted private homes. And a builder economics fact that made round knobs cheaper to install in tract housing and cheaper to keep installing, with no force pushing the market the other way. Take any one of those three away and the American home transitions to lever handles. Take all three away, which is essentially what Europe did, and you get the lever standard that the rest of the developed world adopted as obvious decades ago. And here is the part most people never realize. The round door knob is a known accessibility failure in the official Building Accessibility Code of the United States. The federal government considers it inadequate for any public building. Yet the same hardware that is legally non-compliant in a coffee shop is the default choice in the bedroom of a single-family home next door, because the residential side of the building code never adopted the same standard. Hidden Systems explains the everyday things in your home and daily life that look like simple, ordinary choices, but are actually the result of decisions, laws, and economics layered together long before you ever turn the handle. Subscribe so you do not miss the next one. Now let me walk you back to where this divergence began. In 1878, a man named Osborne Dorsey received a patent for a doorknob and door closing device in the United States. Before then, most American door hardware was actually imported from Europe. Between 80 and 95% of American door handles before the 1830s came from European manufacturers. Dorsey's patent, and the manufacturing innovations that followed, helped launch an American door hardware industry that grew rapidly. Between 1830 and 1876, more than 100 patents were filed for doorknob and handle improvements in the United States alone. By the early 1900s, the American doorknob industry was producing round knobs at massive scale. Standardized, affordable, mass-manufactured. They became the default for every new home built in America. Round, brass, or steel, with a simple turning mechanism. Cheap. Reliable. Easy to install. Easy to manufacture. Europe, meanwhile, never developed a single dominant residential doorknob industry the same way. European homes used a mix of knobs and levers throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, with regional variations. When mid-20th century manufacturing scaled up across Europe, the lever handle had practical and aesthetic advantages that the industry leaned into. By the 1970s and 1980s, the lever became the residential default across Germany, France, Italy, the Netherlands, Scandinavia, and much of the rest of the continent. Same century. Two completely different industrial paths. One country mass-produced round knobs at low cost before levers were widely available. The other never locked into a single design and ended up moving toward the better one. First cause: America industrialized the round knob before levers were standardized. This is the foundation. Every other constraint built on top of it. Once an entire American hardware industry, every American building contractor, every American homeowner, and every American door manufacturer had standardized around the round knob, transitioning to levers would have required redesigning doors, retooling factories, and retraining installers across the whole country at the same time. The market response to that kind of switching cost is predictable. Nothing happened. The round knob stayed because it was already there, and because nothing was forcing it out. Even as engineers and designers came to understand that lever handles were more accessible, more ergonomic, and easier to use, the residential industry kept producing round knobs because that was the existing infrastructure. Here, I have to admit something. When I started researching this video, I assumed Americans simply preferred the look of round knobs, a kind of cultural attachment to a classic style. The data forced me to throw that assumption out completely. There is no consumer preference data showing Americans actively prefer round knobs over levers when both are available. When American homeowners do install lever handles, they generally report higher satisfaction. The round knob persists not because it was chosen. It persists because it was already there, and switching costs prevented an organized change. The behavior did not precede the system. The 1878 industrialization created the system, and the system kept producing the behavior long after a better design existed. Second cause: the ADA quietly required lever handles, but only in public buildings. In 1990, the United States passed the Americans with Disabilities Act. As part of the building accessibility provisions that followed, door hardware in commercial and public buildings became subject to specific standards. Hardware had to be operable with one hand. It could not require tight grasping, pinching, or twisting of the wrist, and it had to be operable with less than 5 pounds of force. The round door knob failed every part of that standard. A round knob requires tight grasping and wrist twisting to operate. It cannot be opened with a closed fist, an elbow, or anyone who lacks fine motor control. Under ADA, round knobs were effectively banned from new commercial American construction. Hospitals, schools, government buildings, offices, restaurants, hotels, all of them switched to lever handles or push hardware to comply. But the ADA explicitly excluded private residences. The accessibility standards that required lever handles in every public American building did not extend into private homes. A doctor's office had to comply. The doctor's own house next door did not. The same hardware that was legally inadequate for the front door of a building serving the public was perfectly acceptable for the front door of the home where that same building's owner lived. This created a strange split. Americans started encountering lever handles constantly in their daily lives outside the home, at work, at the grocery store, at the doctor, at school, without those levers ever migrating into the home itself. The exposure was there. The choice was there. But the building code that could have nudged residential construction toward levers specifically chose not to. Third cause: builder economics kept the round knob in tract housing. Here is the cause almost nobody knows. When American builders construct new tract housing, they install hundreds or thousands of doors at a time. Every dollar saved per door multiplies across an entire development. Standard round knobs are slightly cheaper than lever handles at the bulk purchase level. They are also slightly faster to install, and they have well-established supply chains, well-trained installers, and predictable performance. A builder choosing between knobs and levers for a 200-home development is not weighing accessibility against ergonomics. They are weighing a small per-door savings multiplied across thousands of installations. Over a development, The cumulative savings of round knobs versus levers can be meaningful. So unless a homeowner specifically requests levers as an upgrade, the builder defaults to knobs. This creates a feedback loop. New homes are built with knobs because builders choose knobs by default. Homeowners moving into those homes inherit the knobs without choosing them. Replacement hardware industries focus on knobs because that is what the existing stock requires. Hardware stores stock more knobs because that is what sells. Every layer of the system keeps producing knobs because every previous layer already did. European systems went the other way. The lever handle, once standardized in residential construction, became the default purchase, the default install, the default replacement, and the default supply chain. The feedback loop in Europe runs in favor of levers exactly the way the American feedback loop runs in favor of knobs. Compare those two homes for a second. An American home has round knobs throughout. Residents grip and twist dozens of times a day. Visitors with arthritis, children, people carrying groceries, all adapt to the knob through extra effort. The knob is so universal it does not feel like a choice. It feels like a default. A German home has lever handles throughout. Residents push down with whatever part of their body is free at the moment. Children operate them easily. Elderly residents operate them without grip. Hands-full residents nudge with an elbow or hip. The lever is so universal it does not feel like a choice either. It also feels like a default. Same activity. Same century of residential design. Two completely different relationships with the simple act of opening a door. One requires fine motor control every time. The other does not. Neither is illegal in its own country, but they are not interchangeable, and the difference adds up across millions of door openings per person across a lifetime. Stack those three causes together. A 1878 industrialization that locked in the round knob, an ADA law that required levers in public buildings but not private homes, and builder economics that kept knobs cheaper for tract housing, and you get the modern American doorknob. A piece of hardware that everyone who lives with it has used so often they cannot imagine an alternative. So embedded in residential construction that switching would require a coordinated push that has never happened. So invisible to most American homeowners that they have never thought about whether their door hardware could be better. Now here is where it gets interesting. In 2014, the Canadian city of Vancouver passed a law banning round doorknobs in new residential construction. All new homes built in Vancouver have to use lever handles. The reasoning was accessibility. Vancouver's growing elderly population and disability advocates had pushed for the change for years. The law passed. Builders adapted. New Vancouver homes are now built with levers as the default. The transition was not difficult. It just required someone to require it. No major American city has passed equivalent legislation for residential homes. The closest equivalents at the state or local level have been recommendations rather than requirements. Without legal pressure, the American residential market continues to default to knobs. There is one detail worth noting. The American disability rights movement has actively advocated for lever handles in residential construction for decades. Adapters are sold that clamp onto existing round knobs to convert them to a lever-like motion. The fact that an entire small industry exists to retrofit knobs into levers is, in itself, evidence that the lever is the design more people prefer once they encounter both options side by side. Read that backwards. The retrofit adapter industry exists because Americans are quietly converting their own knobs into levers, one door at a time, without the residential construction industry ever making the change at the source. The market is voting with adapters. The supply chain has not caught up. The American hardware industry of the late 1800s assumed they were simply mass-producing a useful, durable, affordable product. They could not have foreseen that a century later their original design would become the legal example of an accessibility failure in public buildings while remaining the default choice in private homes, that European residential construction would quietly move past it, and that one Canadian city would ban it outright while the country that invented it kept installing it in every new house built. Every round door knob in an American home today is a 19th century industrial decision still being made, one home at a time, in a market that already knows there is something better. What kind of door handles do you have at home, knobs or levers? And if you have ever traveled to Europe, did the lever handles feel easier the first time you used them? Drop it in the comments. I want to see how this varies across this channel. I read every single one.